Assalamu alaikum.
I can just sit.
Okay.
It's okay.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. This Ramadan has gone by very, very quickly. I don't know if this has been your experiences, but my experience is that this Ramadan has gone just like that. And what are we doing in Ramadan? We are doing more prayer and more reading of the Quran, recitation of the Quran, and all of this should generate thinking or contemplation. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is reported to have said, and this is one of my favorite narrations, he says that contemplation for a single hour is more beneficial than a year's worth of ritual worship. تَفَكْرُ السَّاعَةَ خَيْرٌ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ سَنَةٍ. This is one of my favorite narrations. So this month of Ramadan has sort of forced me to really contemplate, to think about many things, both on a personal level and on a communal level. And it's really something on a communal level that I would like to share tonight. First, let me say that as we are blessed to be Muslims, we are blessed to be followers of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or within the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so I don't say that statement as a statement of arrogance. After all of the prophets and all of the messengers of God have come from the same source. They have come from Almighty Allah. And so in a sense, we also belong to them, and they belong to us. لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. That we as Muslims, we are to make no distinction between the prophets. They're all from the same God, from Allah. But at the same time, we are blessed to be from the ummah of Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. For the simple reason that we have more reliable information on his history than we do the previous prophets. I mean, look at the prophet that comes before Muhammad, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, Jesus. There are people who doubt the existence of Jesus, and there's a particular Christian theologian that I read quite a lot. I find him to be a very brilliant theologian, even though I disagree with 90% of his conclusions. But there is a particular Christian theologian that I have in mind who has written so many books, and he's basically disproved everything within Christian doctrine. I mean, even some of the rituals and some of the things that are known among our Christian brothers and sisters. But this sort of situation does not exist with the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. It doesn't exist with the Prophet Muhammad. Yes, there are controversial things. There are disagreements about certain things that the Prophet may have did or not did, or certain things that the Prophet may have said or not said. Those things do exist. But we are fortunate to be from the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because we have a broad, largely agreed upon historical outline. We know when he was born. We know when he died. We know about his marriages. We know about his treaties. We know about his battles. The most important information from a historical perspective about Rasulullah, we have it. We have possession of it. What I wanted to look at tonight is not just the Prophet, but the followers, the early followers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we know, as we should know, the revelation began in the month of Ramadan, and he began, when he received the revelation, he was inviting his friends, he's inviting his family and his friends to absorb the message and to be impacted by the message. His young cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhu, is one of the first to come. Bilal, the Ethiopian, he is likewise one of the first to come. His good friend Abu Bakr, likewise, is one of the first to come. He was a relatively wealthy man, Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Abu Bakr. So the message of Muhammad, of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his message was attractive to the downtrodden, to youth, and to women. By the way, do we know that the first martyr of Islam was a woman? Sumayya. The first martyr for the cause of Allah was a woman. Now, in the Meccan period, consider that the Meccan period, as we know the Prophet's career is divided into two parts, the Meccan period and the Medina period. Considering that the Meccan period attracted these sorts of human beings, it occurred to me that it is the young, it is the women, families, that is the backbone of a healthy religious community, and likewise of a healthy religious or a healthy spiritual experience. Why the young? Because the young are more likely to be excited for a good cause. They're more likely to sacrifice. They're more likely to go out and fight for the right cause. And why the presence of women? Why is the presence of women necessary? The presence of women is necessary because women are acting or thinking in the same way, supporting the same cause. This is vital to the health of a community. The presence of women and the presence of youth. And again, we learn this not just from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but we learn this really from whom the Prophet first inspired and whom sacrificed for his cause. Look at Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. One of the traditions that we should know, I think this is a very famous story, is the Prophet ﷺ is going to make his hijrah, his migration to Medina. And so Ali is from his family. There's a certain resemblance. Ali sleeps in the Prophet's bed because they know that there are enemies who are waiting to kill the Prophet. Ali sleeps in the Prophet's bed, and in a sense as a decoy to allow the Prophet to escape to Medina. That is an example of being inspired by the right cause. And Ali is a young man in that time. So the point I want to make in this aspect is that the presence of young people and women must be present for a healthy community. And if only women are present in a community, then we have to ask ourselves why. If only men are present in a community, we have to ask ourselves why. We can't have one without the other. If only one is there, then there's a problem. We need both. That is vital for a healthy community. And it's interesting that cult leaders and criminal types of people, they seem to only attract one and not the other. Isn't that interesting? There are cult leaders who only attract women, and they seem any men who come, they seem to run them away. And there are leaders who attract only men, oftentimes young men who are in need of a father figure, and who may become exploited by this father figure. So it's rare for a cult leader or a criminal, someone who is criminally inclined. It's rare for them to have both, for both men, young people, and for women. The message of Islam has been given through all the prophets and through all the messengers. It's been completed with the coming of the Quran, completed with the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This message is a message of dynamic change. Yes, this message tells us about God first and foremost. That's true. It tells us about Tawheed, about the fact that God is one and alone. It tells us about Nabuwah, about prophethood, that God has sent prophets and messengers throughout time. It tells us about the afterlife. But it also tells us about zakat, about putting our money where our mouth is. And zakat reminds us of our responsibility to other human beings. Yes, the deen tells us about fasting. We fast in obedience to Allah. We fast as a means to become closer to Allah, as the Imam has mentioned, I'm sure, many times here. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Yes, that's true. But fasting is also designed to make us more sympathetic to those without need or without food. More examples. Yes, the deen tells us about prayer. That prayer is to be done for Allah. Prayer is to be done to Allah. I noticed that when Shaykhna leads prayer, before he does the takbir, I notice he recites Qul inna salati. Am I right? Did I hear you say this? Qul inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. That's true. That my prayer, my devotional actions in life and death are all for Allah. Yes. Prayers will be done for Allah. We're not to pray to idols. We're not to pray to other human beings. Our prayer and our worship is to be directed towards Allah. But it also tells us, even the very format of the prayer, it forces us to be put in positions of equality and closeness to others. You know, when we line up for the jama'ah, for the congregational prayer, it forces us to be in positions of closeness and brotherhood with other people. And that in itself, the prayer itself, in the jama'ah prayer, the congregational prayer, it creates strong ties of authentic brotherhood and sisterhood. More examples. You know, when people talk about Islam, they talk about that there was an Arab prophet, that there was this Arab man who received revelation, and this Arab man, you know, was the final prophet. But it is that person, that Arab man, he says that there is no virtue in being an Arab over a non-Arab, or a non-Arab over an Arab, or a white over a black, or a black over a white. He said that. He said that. He says also, another famous hadith is this, and let me just sort of share a gloss over of the hadith. Is that there are two companions of the Prophet ﷺ Abu Dhar and Bilal, that they were having an argument about what is unimportant. And I actually don't know, so don't ask me. The narration says that they were having an argument, and this is in Bukhari, that they were having an argument. And during the course of the argument, Abu Dhar says to Bilal, "You son of a black." And this is perhaps the equivalent of the N-word. And the Prophet ﷺ, he hears this. And the hadith says his face became red with anger. It became red. And he says, it says Abu Dhar, you have ignorance within you. And look what that admonition from the Prophet did. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at that, what the admonition did to him. Abu Dhar, he felt so ashamed that he puts his face on the ground. He doesn't want to take it away until Bilal stepped over it. That's a very powerful hadith. Very powerful hadith. Continuing on. What about the dynamic message that this deen is? So yes, we have ladies here, and the Quran tells ladies to dress in a certain way, to cover in a certain way. وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُوبِهِنَّ. Yes, it says that. But it also tells men not to stare lustfully. It's in Surah An-Nur. It tells men not to stare lustfully. It tells women likewise not to stare lustfully. It's all in the same surah, in the same context. Surah An-Nur, the 24th chapter. Yes, Sheikhna, we're sort of having a discussion earlier, a political discussion. This religion talks about jihad. Yes, it does. But it also talks about peace.
That's right.
It says if the enemy wants peace with you, then you should try to make peace with him, and keep your trust in God. Yes, the religion tells us about charity, but it also tells us about riba, about the prohibition of usury. So these are examples. These are a handful of examples of Islam being a force of spirituality with worldly applications or with worldly implications. So Islam hasn't come to conquer. It hasn't come to make everybody robots, to make everybody clones. Islam has come to enhance life. Whatever good that we have, Islam comes to enhance that. And whatever bad we have, Islam seeks to try to remove it from us. It even prefers, this is contrary to what people believe, Islam doesn't prefer to go fight the evildoer. The preference is for the evildoer to be reformed. Wallahi, that's the preference. Maybe there are times when fighting is necessary. That's true. That's life. But really, the preference of Islam is to reform the evildoer. That's the preference. There's so many examples of that. And perhaps the example I'm going to share is not even on my notes. Perhaps the example I'm going to share is controversial. But think about it. Look at the career of Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan spent many years fighting Islam, fighting the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet overcame, basically Abu Sufyan, you can think of Abu Sufyan as one of the main leaders of the Meccan opposition. So when the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, when he enters into Mecca, he says the people who are in the house of Abu Sufyan is safe. Abu Sufyan himself is safe. And what happens is that Abu Sufyan is changed. He went from wanting to fight Rasulullah throughout all those years to wanting to becoming a good person within the society. And as we mentioned last week, the example of Sayyidina Umar, he's perhaps arguably maybe a more stronger example. He wants to kill the Prophet himself. He goes to kill Rasulullah himself. And by coincidence, and I put that in quotation marks because it's really no coincidence, by coincidence he hears the word of Allah. And it impacted him so much that he went from wanting to kill the Prophet to when the Prophet actually died many years later, he says, no way, Rasulullah is not dead. This is the emotion that he said, Rasulullah is not dead. Anyone who says Rasulullah is dead, I'm going to cut him with my sword. He says that Rasulullah is like Moses. Moses went to the mountain, alayhi salam. He goes to the mountain for 40 days. He'll be back. He says this out of love of a person that he wanted to initially kill. Isn't that dynamic? Isn't that powerful? Now, what in the world does all this have to do with Ramadan? Ramadan. In Ramadan, we abstain from eating and from drinking anything and from physical relations. In the hadith literature, which undoubtedly the Imam and the A'imma here have mentioned again and again before Ramadan and during the month of Ramadan, we have a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he says that, I'm just going to paraphrase the hadith, that certain things such as backbiting annuls the fast. You know, the way that he describes it, alayhi salatu wasalam, the way that he describes it is people who gain nothing from the fast, like people who've been engaged in ghiba and backbiting, that they've gained nothing from the fast except hunger and thirst. And this is a very famous hadith, which I'm sure has been mentioned here many times. In a modern context, which a lot of us modern Muslims do, I don't know if I should use the term modern Muslims, but Muslims living in the modern era. Let me put it like that. I think that's a more acceptable term than saying modern Muslims. Excuse the term modern Muslims. Despite how I'm dressed, maybe I don't consider myself a modernist. Although other people maybe a different story. They may consider me modernist, but I don't consider myself a modernist. Many Muslims, what a lot of us do is we take what we know of what the spirit of Ramadan does, we take it some steps further. So a lot of Muslims go to the theater to see their favorite movies before Ramadan comes. Did any of us do that? It's okay, one person admitted. Okay, this person admitted to it. Movie night before Ramadan. Was it the Avengers movie? You don't have to tell me.
I didn't do it this year.
So a lot of people will avoid going into the theater, for example, during the month of Ramadan. And a lot of people will not turn on the television during the month of Ramadan. In Egypt now, the culture that exists in Egypt is that the marriage season, the season when people are getting married, that it starts right after Ramadan. So in the month of Ramadan, even married couples, for example, in Egypt, the culture in Egypt is that married couples do not engage in relations even in the evening. You know, this is the culture that exists, and I'm not saying that these things are right or wrong. What I'm saying is these are examples of human beings who are looking at Ramadan and looking at the lessons of Ramadan and the spirit that Ramadan seeks to create, and they're trying to these are examples of human beings trying to capture that spirit of what Ramadan is. Similarly, many mosques in this country and other countries as well, they operate soup kitchens only in the month of Ramadan. And one of the Gulf countries, I was recently informed of this, and one of the Gulf countries, they started this, I don't know the name of the program, but they've started this program where they have refrigerators outside. And they stock the refrigerators outside for people who are hungry to come and take food, and the particular emphasis is on the people, or the workers, the guest workers who come from other countries, who are often very poor and may not be able to buy food and all that. So let's go back to the Prophet for a moment, alayhi salatu wasalam. The Sunnah of the Prophet is more than simply a brand of clothing. The Sunnah of the Prophet is more than beard. The Sunnah of the Prophet is much more than those things. The Sunnah of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is inspiring. It inspires. It is attractive to those sincerely seeking to make themselves and make their surroundings better. The Sunnah. See, people today, they talk about just the Book of Allah, and I am a person who is very centered on the Book of Allah, don't get me wrong. But the Book of Allah came through a man. It was revealed to a man. It was revealed to a human being, to a messenger, to God's messenger. And the Sunnah that God's messenger practiced, this Sunnah didn't create just books, a book that someone reads. It created a community. And yes, any community has its flaws, flawed human beings, people with secrets, people with dirt, with skeletons in their closet, as they say. But it created a community of people who are striving to be better. Look at the example I mentioned earlier about Abu Dhar and Bilal. Abu Dhar didn't argue. As soon as the Prophet said those words to him, you still have aspects of ignorance within you. As soon as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as soon as he said that, Abu Dhar puts his head to the ground. That's something. He didn't try to argue it out, to try to defend himself. I meant this and that. وَقَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. That's the attitude of the believers. That's the attitude that he displayed. May Allah be pleased with him. The Abu Dhar. The believers are those who hear and they give their obedience. وَقَالُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. So, it's okay to have flaws. If God had wanted angels to populate the earth, He would have done that. He populated the earth with human beings. And likewise, He sent human beings to be His messengers. It's okay to have flaws, as long as we recognize that they are flaws and that we try to work on them. I think that it's important to not only look at the Prophet ﷺ personally, to look at his supplications, and look at his sunnah, and to look at the things that we look at. But I think it's also important to look at the priorities that the early followers set for themselves, and to look at who precisely was attracted to that message. So let me conclude with these words. What we should learn from the Prophet's Sunnah, what we should want as being people who have read the Sunnah, have studied the Sunnah, who have studied the Quran, what we want is, we want strong families, not cults. Really, we want strong families, not cults. We want healthy communities, not bus stations. A bus station, people, there might be a crowd there, but then when the bus comes, they leave. We want guides, not manipulative preachers who are on ego trips. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting, our prayers, and any good actions that we do. Wa akhira da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. We still have 20 minutes? Okay. So since we still have 20 minutes, any thoughts or reflections or comments upon what was mentioned? Yes, ma'am.
The comment about a woman called the Don first. Is that what you said? Did I hear that correctly?
No, I don't think I said that. The first martyr. I was talking about the first martyr.
Oh,
The first, the first martyr was a woman named Sumayya, and what happened with her is essentially, first her son his name is Ammar. He accepted Islam, and then by Allah's blessings, his parents accepted Islam, and when the Meccans they found out, they decided to sort of try to influence them to not do that, to not accept Islam. So they killed Sumayya. They put her to the ground. They tie her to the ground, and if I remember correctly, they pull her apart with horses. There's a term for it, but I can't remember what that term is.
She was speared.
Sorry?
Speared.
Speared?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was the first martyr of Islam. And that's our question? Yes, ma'am.
At the beginning, you just said a hadith where it says contemplation for an hour, and then I missed it.
Yes. There are different versions of this hadith, but the one that I quoted, it says that contemplation for a single hour is more valuable than a year's worth of worship. In Arabic it goes, تَفَكُّرُ سَاعَةً خَيْرٌ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ سَنَةٍ. So again, if you look it up, there are different. Some of the narrations have different numbers, and I admit that the veracity of this narration is disputed. I admit that, but even if the veracity of the statement is disputed, the sentiment behind it is not disputed, because indeed, in the Quran itself, it often talks about it. It is a guide for لِقَوْمِ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Is a guide for people who think. It itself has been given إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. It's been given so that perhaps that we exercise our minds. So even if the hadith itself is not authentic, the sentiment behind the hadith is certainly authentic. Yes, ma'am. Any other reflections or comments? Yes, sir.
Last week you rushed through the last part of due to time restraint. Did you have those notes with you?
Yes, I still have those. I still have those notes.
You jumped ahead of some things you passed.
I know I did, but I had to try to remember what precisely that I.
I think you went to the last five. You jumped to the last five and you passed those just previous.
Let's see.
Yeah, we jumped to the last five, 3, 4, and 5 points, and skip past the first few ones. She actually didn't elaborate on, I think, the second, third, fourth, just to go forward. 3rd and 4th you mentioned, but you didn't get to go into detail.
Is it the attentiveness and self-evaluation? Okay. Okay, so what our brother is talking about is some of my comments from last Sunday, and we were looking at some of the things that, or some of the examples that the Quranic revelation should have on us. And one of the things that the brother is mentioning, has a very good memory, by the way, more than the speaker, is that one of the points was attentiveness. See, it's actually very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ would be criticized by his critics for all kinds of things. And a lot of these criticisms are recorded within the Quran. One of them, it says, he is udhun. Huwa udhun. He's an ear. And what they meant by that is that, he's naive. And today we say, the person is naive. He's gullible. And this is actually mentioned in one of the books of tafsir, explaining what the kuffar meant by the word udhun, that he doesn't have the ability to distinguish between what's true and what's false. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells the Prophet to reply to that. He says, yes, he's an ear. قُلْ أُذْنُ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Yes, the Prophet is an ear, but he's an ear of benefit to you. So, in other words, maybe someone thinks you to be naive, but one of the benefits of being impacted by the Quran is that it should create in you attentiveness. And being attentive means not being arrogant, not being dismissive, listening to people when they have to say something. If they have a criticism, let them criticize. If it's a legitimate criticism given in love and given in respect and genuine desire to help, listen to it. The fifth one that I believe the brother is referencing is self-evaluation. Self-evaluation. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is famously, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would make istighfar 70 times a day. And in fact, the hadith says أكثر من, there's more than 70 times a day. And so you might say, well, the Prophet was sinless. Okay, the Prophet was sinless. I agree with that. The Prophet is sinless. But often the Prophet ﷺ does things in order to help us, his followers. Often he does things to help us, being his followers. So it helps us to look at ourselves. If we're in a constant state of making istighfar, then it reminds us that we're not perfect. It reminds us that we still have skeletons in our closet. It reminds us to constantly be trying to work on ourselves. Really, it reminds us to think properly. And the process of thinking properly is called muhasabah. Of trying to reckon things in the right way is called muhasabah. Other thoughts or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have an email? Like if you have a
Yes, sure. It's spelled WAHEED79@yahoo.com. Any other reflections or? Are we free to use the time? Did we finish with the time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, if there are no other thoughts or comments, I always want thoughts and comments. But if there are no more, then I would propose that we end our gathering with a supplication, And this supplication is one that I tried to follow the Prophet ﷺ. He would end his supplications with this, end his gatherings with this particular supplication. So I will recite this supplication in Arabic as well as English. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Glorified is you, O Allah, and to you belongs praise. We testify that none is worshipped except you. We seek your forgiveness and turn to you in repentance. Amen.